I think it is definitely a very great mistake not to live in the 20th century. It's a much greater mistake to live only in the 20th century. So there are wonderful things from ancient cultures which can make our life much fuller and more enjoyable. And I think we lose a lot if we ignore those.
During the time of the Spanish Armada, these great bonfires were lit on top of isolated hills to warn the people of danger. And I think of my father that way, as a blazing fire on an isolated mountain.
Author, philosopher, linguist, student of ancient wisdom, teacher, health guru, and visionary, Edmond Székely was one of the most influential founders of today's mind, body, spirit health movement. Székely's teachings and healing practices would inspire people all over the world to take charge of their own health and well-being. His research and adventurous spirit led to extraordinary insights into many challenges those of us in the 21st century still struggle to understand.
There are many dimensions to Professor Székely that make him unique, in my opinion, as a visionary, not just for the 20th century or for the first half of the 20th century, but I feel even more for the 21st century.
My father always had an entourage of wise friends with him. Many times during the day, he would pause and he would say, "As my good friend Marcus Aurelius once said," and then he would say it in Latin and then translate for the benefit of everybody else. Tranquility is nothing but a good ordering of the mind. Medicine men from many different traditions teach with humor. And my father loved good jokes and good stories. He had a huge laugh and tremendous gusto, and he was a great storyteller.
He was very charismatic and had a booming laugh and a great energy that drew people. And when he came in a room, you knew he was there.
He loved to lecture. He liked the title professor, El Profesor. When you meet a mentor like that, it changes your life. Your whole way of living, your whole way of thinking.
He had an interesting expression, which he took from the Mexicans, which he used all his life. Siempre mejor, always better. Instead of saying good morning or good afternoon or good evening, he'd say siempre mejor. And I know no Spanish at all, but I learned those two words, siempre mejor.
Székely was a true holistic thinker who gleaned wisdom from all religions, philosophies, and cultures. Most of all, he gathered vast reservoirs of knowledge that would lead to better health for ourselves, our communities, and our planet.
I think one of the reasons why he was so aware of what was lost in the West was because at a very early age, when he was a teenager, he was aware that cultures can break down, that cultures really have a time when they rise and then have a peak period and then they descend, or they can even collapse pretty fast. In the late 30s, then, he summarizes his holistic vision in two incredibly important books. He was very clear on how he wanted to bring the great traditions of the past, the wisdom of old ages, into modern times in order to recover what was lost in modern times.
Edmond Székely's books brought to life forgotten wisdom traditions based on a holistic understanding of health and vitality, consciousness, and the innate healing forces of nature.
Using simple, accessible language to bring what was most relevant from the past into the present, he was mostly trying to build a bridge for people and to help people make healthier decisions about their lives. And my father's passions took him to every corner of the earth and across all of the ages of civilization and pre-literate cultures as well. My father grew up in Transylvania, in a market town at the far north of Transylvania, nearly to the Czechoslovakian border. At that time, it was a cultural crossroads.
His earliest experience in his childhood is the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. There were Ottoman Turks in the area. There were Romanians, Hungarians, Jews, Austrians.
As a young man, Edmond studied at the University of Cluj, near the great Bathenaeum Library, which houses many ancient manuscripts.
You know, he had to go where it was at in his time. And he did the grand tour. Paris, Berlin, Rome, everywhere in Western Europe and London, of meeting the most prolific writers, the most exciting thinkers.
My father lived for a time in southern France in a village called Aspremont that was in Les Alpes-Maritimes. There was a Zarathustrian community there, a utopian community. They dressed in white and they studied Zoroaster, and they were trying to live a very simple, holistic life.
For Székely, it wasn't about dogma. It wasn't about titles and robes and official rituals. He wanted to see really what was it, what was the axis that the people lived with? How did they connect to the above? How did they connect to the stars, to the cosmos, and how did they connect to the earth?
In the 1930s and 40s, Székely's translations of the Essene Gospel of Peace and many related books influenced several generations of people who yearned to find a more simple, earth-centered life.
Through the Essene Gospel of Peace, many people with Judeo-Christian roots were able to find a body of sacred text that honored the feminine, the earth, and the body.
I've been talking at various meetings now across America, and everybody knows the gospel of peace of Jesus Christ. They teach the importance of raw foods, herbal medicine, fasting, all the things which the world now in despair is turning to in overwhelming numbers.
Seek the fresh air of the forests, of the fields. Put off your shoes and your clothing and suffer the air to embrace all your body. Then breathe long and deeply that the angel of air may be brought within you. In the air, the water, the earth, plants, sunbeams, in the depths and in the heights. The laws of life speak to you.
My father honored the feminine. The earth was the manifestation of the work of the angels of the earthly mother. The earth was a sacred place. And then that is in balance with his respect of the cosmic forces, of sunlight, of all the unseen forces that also generate life.
was a treasure hunter for wisdom, and he picked it up where everybody walked by. He would go to a group. That means he knew that people were far ahead. He knew he had to go far back. He knew he had to go into a great distance. And so his explorations, he did a huge horizontal exploration, and that was his expedition to go to Tahiti.
In Tahiti, Székely laid the foundations for cosmotherapy, which was aimed at reconnecting every aspect of an individual with all of nature's healing forces. He found that the imported foods, clothes, and lifestyles of French colonialism were destroying the health and vitality of the island population. It was here that Székely began his healing work, treating people with tropical diseases, as well as conditions imported from Europe. And in this beautiful Polynesian paradise, Székely met two people who would provide him with lifelong and crucial support for his work. One would become his future wife.
We had a favorite swimming hole on the river, and one day we would bicycle over to it, and sometimes after school we would go and meet there, and on weekends we would camp out, and that's how we met him. There were 5 or 6 people who would come regularly to our swimming hole. But after a while, he'd had 15 or 20 people who would come and exercise in the river and diet.
Purcell Weaver was a young English lawyer who suffered from chronic ill health that years of drugs and visits to countless medical specialists hadn't cured. While he was touring the South Pacific, he chanced to meet Edmond Székely in Tahiti. Following Székely's natural protocols, he found a healer who restored his health and a lifelong friend.
I followed his prescription pretty faithfully. It involved having a very restricted diet, bobbing up and down in a local stream, lying in the sun, and doing breathing exercises and also muscular exercises. I knew that I was getting better. And at some point in 3.5 months, I felt that it was more useful as an occupation for me to make his work known than to become a solicitor.
Weaver translated Székely's books, found publishers for them, and established the International Health and Education Center on his family's estate in Surrey. The Lawrence Weaver House became the heart of the Cosmovitalist movement and taught the principles and practices of cosmotherapy to a growing global constituency. Székely and Weaver continued their healing work through summer camps in Jamaica, California, and Mexico, always along riverbanks. Deborah and her family came to many of these camps, and when she finished school, she stayed on as the professor's secretary, and they married in 1939. It was when the professor and his new wife came to Tecate, Mexico in 1940 that he had a chance to put all his gathered wisdom into practice. Here at the site that would later become Rancho La Puerta, they started the Essenes School of Life.
We baked our own bread, we grew our own wheat, we had our own granary. It was a commune. The professor was the leader. And the professor would lecture every day. In the morning, you would go partway up the mountain and you would say particular prayers to nature.
Rancho La Puerta became a place of healing and personal transformation. Many famous people came to the ranch, and its sister spa, the Golden Door, which was established in 1958. Aldous Huxley was a regular guest. He wrote The Doors of Perception and parts of Island while at the ranch. Rancho La Puerta was fertile ground for new ideas and ultimately became a leading destination spa and resort full of innovation and vitality.
A lot of people used to come here in order to learn about Mexico and also to play the Toltec game, which was a lot of fun. And inside the solarium, they had all these vapor baths a la Mexican with different plants, roots, and flowers. They smelled very nice. And then people would get in and get all these different aromas in the water and the steam.
There were Sumerian baths, herbal wraps, yoga, breathing classes, and many other unusual treatments and techniques that the professor brought to Rancho La Puerta from cultures around the world.
I did a lot of things he recommended. I went into the Swiss sunbin and took nude baths and got a lot of vitamin D and took hikes and walks. But he believed ardently in sun, air, and water.
He was very devoted to helping people to overcome obstacles in their physical body and psychologically. I know that he helped many people improve their lives.
The ideal will be to harmonize civilization and nature.
In a visionary venture to bring people into direct contact with both nature and culture, the professor created Mille Méditations.
Studying the life of Michelangelo, he did discover a mountain full of fantastic rock formations, hundreds of beautiful rocks. And then he decided that he would like to spend his whole life there, not to move the rocks, but work on those rocks right there and create what he called an orbis pictus, all the beautiful things of the world. And I thought maybe I should find a similar place.
It was about a 2-mile walk. And the first thing you came to was a saying by Tagore. And you sat down. Everywhere that you had a saying, you sat down and meditated about it. And then the next place you came to was Greece. You sat down. All the great high points of civilization, Greece and Rome, the Essenes, Zarathustra, Buddha, was a miraculous time for me. People don't realize when they pass by a rock how many years it took to get like that. And the lichen, what's growing on it, a living thing. People just aren't aware. And he wanted people to stop and listen and think.
One of the core symbols in the Essene tradition is the tree of life. And man sits at the base of the tree of life. Half of him is underground with the roots of the tree, and the other half is above ground with the branches that are in the air. And it's symbolic of how man represents the unity of the earthly forces and the cosmic forces. My father talked about longevity in one of his books. He says that longevity was bestowed upon the beings that were of greatest service to all of life, and the greatest longevity was bestowed upon the trees. Zarathustra said, "Gardening is cooperation between man and nature, and there is no more perfect occupation for man, and there exists no more favorable influence for the human organism than work in the open air, in nature among flowers, plants, and trees." So he envisioned a life where we would wake and do physical work, and the morning would be devoted to agriculture and silviculture. Then in the afternoons, we would work in service to the community. And that this work really needed to grow out of our own passion, our own creativity. And then the evenings could be devoted to contemplation and imagination and an appreciation of the great masterpieces. And he felt that in this way, we could nourish our spirit and our bodies and our community. He sensed a long time ago that our industrial lifestyle was making us unhealthy. And he wanted to find ways to reconnect us to our own bodies, to one another, and especially to nature. And he had tremendous faith in her healing powers. My father said that healthy plants mean healthy people, and it's impossible to raise a strong race on a weak soil. As a culture, we've mined our soil, we've vastly denatured our soil, and he saw that as a result of that, there would be many chronic diseases.
In 1975, the professor retired to Costa Rica, where he spent much of the last years of his life riding in the peace and quiet of a mountain sanctuary. He died there in 1979 at the age of 74. He is buried at Rancho La Puerta. Edmond Székely's visionary genius left behind a vast legacy of wisdom. His work continues to guide us toward a deeper understanding of how to live in harmony with the laws of nature, connected to spirit, imbued with purpose, and blessed with inner peace.
He would often tell me, "Little owl, there are many fine books, but the most important of all is the book of nature. You must read from the book of nature every day."
Zarathustra said, "The most noble profession is that of the gardener of the earth. The fullness of life depends upon man's harmony with the totality of the natural and cosmic laws. Our individual evolution is a job that has to be carried on day by each individual himself. It is a lifetime task."
One beautiful principle which we still could use it in the 20th century in every teaching, in every social system, in every institution, in every person. There are good things and bad things. Nothing is perfect. Perfection is an ideal. We may never reach it, but we may go closer and closer to it. We always shall try to strengthen what is good. And if the good becomes stronger and stronger, the bad will become weaker and weaker, and at the end it may disappear.
Thank you.